Well, let me deal with the most important part of this first, which isn't to do with how we chose to regulate Uber in the end, although that has become a model that the people around the globe are looking at as being successful. But the most important thing is obviously that we make sure that Toronto residents in any vehicle or in any place are safe from being assaulted, sexually or otherwise. And in that case, one of the advantages to the Uber system is that it actually does allow you, more so than any other kind of vehicle of its kind, to know who the driver is, to know when the pickup took place, and a lot of those kinds of details that oftentimes in a taxi cab you don't know. And so we have to count on the company, and they have been very cooperative when incidents of this kind have come up, to provide that information to the police when an allegation of this kind or an incident of this kind happens. And I think that that is actually one advantage to that system, in that the technology actually allows you to see who the passenger was, who the driver was, exactly what time and place things happen, because it does record that. Having said all of that, I think we have to, and we certainly have indicated to Uber, as we do to the taxi industry, that we have zero tolerance for that sort of thing. And when I say we are the regulators of those businesses. We are not the police. The city oversees the police, but the police operate under their own leadership, accountable to a police services board of which I'm a member. And I can only say that I think the message has been sent loud and clear that there's zero tolerance for that kind of thing, or anything even approaching it. And I think as these incidents have come up, unfortunately they have been few and far between, they've been dealt with by Uber and or by the taxi companies and or by us in as strict a manner as you possibly could expect, and the police have again tried to do their job. I want to just say on the general subject of Uber and how it was admitted into the Toronto marketplace, they came into the Toronto marketplace in a way that I did not approve of, where they just came in here and operated without any regulation at all and just figured they could just arrive and so on. I came to the conclusion, partly for reasons of what I think is sound strategy for the city and partly for reasons of accepting reality. By the time I took office, they were into the hundreds of thousands of customers in Toronto. And so if I was to do what people were urging me to do from the cab industry and other quarters who supported the status quo, they just wanted me to send them out of town packing and tell them to sort of roll up their carpets and leave. I didn't think that was either realistic or good for the city. I believe this city should be serving as a home for people who have disruptive technologies, who represent the way of doing things in the future, but that they have to come in to a city and do business on a basis that is fair. So instead of trying to chase them out of town, as they've tried to do in a number of other cities and had huge conflicts in the process, we worked instead to develop a series of regulations that essentially accomplished two things. One, it brought Uber under regulation, so there was a degree of control, and this is important to your question, the sexual assault part, that there were screenings done of the drivers that were satisfactory to us, that were similar to the screenings that are done on cab drivers, screenings as in personal background checks that met a standard we set. Two, that there was insurance in place to protect people that is equivalent to what taxi cab drivers are required to have. And three, that the rules under which they operated were equitable vis-a-vis fair competition with the cab industry, who'd been around for a long time and paid money for their licenses. At the same time, the second objective we were trying to set out was to lessen the regulatory load on taxis so they could compete more fairly, because over time they'd become subject to a lot of long pages and books full of regulations, and we actually did reduce some of that regulatory load and reduce some of the requirements on them. And the idea was to create a circumstance in which people could be safe, first and foremost, safe from assault, safe from accidents, safe from drivers that had bad backgrounds, could have a choice, and including the adoption of and embracing of the latest technology, of which Uber was a representative, and that they would compete fairly with taxis. And I'm proud of what we achieved there, because you haven't heard much about it in terms of conflict since that time. And unlike some other cities where they successfully, in quotation marks, chased Uber out of town, we have Uber here, and I quite frankly hope some of the other companies like Lyft will come here and compete as well. So we'll have even more choice, because I think that's good for consumers to have choice, as long as it's fair choice, safe choice, and regulated choice, and I think that's what we have in Toronto now.